I am still basking in the success of my video about oil and gas prices, so I thought I would pile on to my Nobel Prize winning knowledge about economics. And it's also based on a conversation that I had with somebody over the last few days when I started to talk about how I'm going to begin traveling again. They asked me about money. Not how much money I need, but how do I pay for things? Where do I keep money? Or how do I get access to money while you're on the road? So that's what this video is going to be about. When I say on the road, I mean in a foreign country. I'm not talking about traveling in the United States, because the way you deal with money when you're traveling in the US, it's a little bit different than if you live in the US and you're traveling outside of it. Money becomes an issue, and it's not a difficult one, but it is something that, unless you know what's going to happen, it's something that a lot of people simply aren't prepared for. And if I want to get money in a foreign country, this is how I would do it. Pro tip number 1, bring your ATM card. The easiest way to get local currency anywhere outside the United States is with an ATM card. There are very few countries in the world that use the US dollar as currency. Number 1, of course, is the United States. Cuba uses the US dollar. Cambodia uses the US dollar. And there may be others that I'm just not aware of. I did have an interesting incident happen to me at the airport in Cambodia. When I got off the plane, my first goal, of course, was to get local currency so I could pay for a taxi to my hotel in Phnom Penh. So I thought I would just do a calculation and convert maybe 20 or 30 US dollars into Cambodian rials and subtract that from, or convert that and get that from the ATM. The Cambodian rial is worth about 4,000 rials to 1 US dollar. So I was trying to withdraw about 150,000 rials, which would be, I think, about $20. But then I found out, when I kept getting error after error, that Cambodia uses the US dollar as currency. So their ATMs at the airport only dispense US dollars. So in effect, what I was trying to do is withdraw 150,000 US dollars from my banking account. Now, obviously, my bank would have frowned upon that for 2 reasons. 1, they have a $200 a day limit. And not to mention, I don't have $150,000 in my checking account. But thankfully, the taxi driver that was going to drive me into town alerted me to the fact that you can only get US dollars out of the ATM machines in Phnom Penh. But the ATM card is the quickest and easiest way to get foreign currency. And the reason you want to use your ATM rather than trying to go to a US bank and getting foreign currency before you go is that the exchange rate you get at the foreign ATM is the better exchange rate that you're going to get. You're not going to get a good exchange rate by getting foreign currency from a US bank. So get it from an ATM in the country that you're going to. Don't bring any with you. One thing to keep in mind about local currency at an ATM is that when you use the ATM, you're going to be asked how much local currency you want. You're not withdrawing US dollars. So be familiar with what the exchange rate is. Like when I get back to Malaysia, for example, 4 Malaysian ringgit is worth about 1 US dollar. So if I want 50, equivalent of 50 US dollars, I'm going to be withdrawing 200 Malaysian ringgit. So be aware of what the exchange rate between your home currency and the foreign currency you're trying to get is, so that you're not, at a loss when you get to the ATM and you don't know what you should withdraw. Before I wrap up about ATMs, I want to stress that no matter what, whether you need to take a taxi into town or anything like that, you're going to need to get at least a little bit of cash at the airport. Don't think that, well, I'll just get it when I get into town. You're going to need local currency for all kinds of little tiny things, like a tip for the cab driver. You might have to pay him in local currency. Some countries have what they call a visa on arrival, which means that you need a visa to go to that country, but you have to get it at the airport. In other words, you can't get into the country unless they give you a visa. And you often have to pay for that. So most governments do not take credit cards. So you're going to have to pay them in cash, and they'll want local currency. I ran into this when I traveled into Turkey, which has visa on arrival for U.S. citizens. But luckily, when I got there, I realized that I needed money that I didn't have. I needed Turkish lira. They didn't have it. But conveniently, the airport authorities knew this and had a number of ATM machines nearby the immigration counters where I could get money or get Turkish lira and pay for my visa on arrival. So you're going to need money or cash for things like that. So get a little bit of cash at least at the airport. One other strategy, which I do not recommend, but which works perfectly well, is changing your local currency. In my case, it would be US dollars, at exchange desks. Money exchange, changer, they go by a lot of different names, and they're usually operated by banks, although some of them are private. The reason I don't recommend that is because the exchange rate you get between your home currency and the local currency is terrible. You're going to lose a lot of money in that kind of a transaction. Now, when you use an ATM, there is an exchange rate. The bank is going to make some money, but it's nowhere near the amount of money that you're going to lose if you go to one of those money exchanging desks. Like I said, they work, they're very convenient, but they're also very expensive. It's something to keep in mind. Let's move on to pro tip number 2. Use a credit card for practically everything that you can think of. Before you leave, find a credit card or a charge card that doesn't charge you a foreign transaction fee. And hopefully one that gives you reward points, miles, or whatever it is that they call. You get airline miles or reward points that you can trade in for cash or prizes or whatever. But the idea is you would use a charge card for everything other than the small incidental things that you need cash for. This is one of the reasons why you don't need to carry a lot of currency around with you when you're traveling, because most places accept credit cards. And if you're going to some place that doesn't, then you should look ahead of time to see what kind of cash you're actually going to need. Now, if you're wary about using a credit card in a foreign country, then you can use something like Google Pay or Apple Pay, PayPal. They have different kinds of things that you can use on your phone now. I am not an expert exactly on how these work, but I'm sure you can look that up. If you decide to use a payment system on your phone like Google Pay or Apple Pay, then I suggest downloading the app onto your phone while you're still at home and practice using it at places like grocery stores, restaurants, or gas stations, just so that you're familiar with how it works. You don't want to whip out your phone in a foreign country and try to use Apple Pay, for example, for the very first time, run into a problem, and not know how to fix it. Do it at home first so that you're familiar with how it works. Let's wrap it up with pro tip number 3. Always be aware of what the exchange rate between your home currency and the currency of the country you're in actually is. You don't want to be caught off guard not knowing whether a price for something that you've been quoted is actually a good price or not. You should always be aware of what the exchange rate between currencies is, just so that you're familiar with what's going on in each transaction. When I live long-term in a certain country, I get used to what the exchange rate is, and you're ending up living on the local economy. And you become familiar with what things cost. But if you're just traveling short-term, you need to be familiar with what the exchange rates are. Hey folks, thanks for watching. If you like this video, please subscribe by clicking my face over there on the left. That's it for today. I'll show myself out.